Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a close look at something we all face, right? Failure and setbacks.
Hmm.
We've gathered some really interesting material insights into the psychology of hitting those lows and some, powerful stories.
Yeah, that's right. Because look, if you're on any kind of journey, big or small, you're absolutely going to hit challenges.
Definitely.
And what's often kind of fascinating is how our first reaction, that gut reaction to stumbling, it's so often driven by ego.
Absolutely. So the mission for this deep dive is really to figure out how we can navigate those inevitable failures, actually learn from them, grow,
Yeah.
and crucially do it without letting ego grab the wheel and, potentially make things worse.
And the sources we've looked at, they give us a great starting point. There's this statement right at the beginning, I think it really frames it. Here we are experiencing the trials endemic to any journey.
That's powerful.
Hmm.
It really brings home that point, doesn't it? That no one is permanently successful. Setbacks aren't weird exceptions.
Nope, just part of life unfolding.
And it's interesting how the material connects ego to this, suggesting it not only leaves you unprepared, but might actually contribute to the failures themselves.
That's a key insight. And what's particularly helpful, I think, is the suggested way forward when you face these things. Instead of getting stuck in like self-pity,
Right.
the advice is to cultivate purpose, poise, and patience. It shifts the focus,
You know?
from just reacting to being more strategic.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit, how we experience these setbacks. The material talks about Fight Club moments,
Ah,
these really jarring events that just like strip everything away and expose some raw truth. There's this Zola quote, if you shut up truth and bury it,
it will but grow and gather to itself such explosive power.
that the day it bursts through, it will blow up everything in its way. Whoa, that really speaks to the power of these moments.
It does. It shows how truth, even if we ignore it, tends to surface, often dramatically if we've kept it buried.
Hmm.
And the examples given really illustrate this in different ways, don't they?
They really do. You've got J.K. Rowling facing just incredibly tough times after college.
Right, failed marriage, poverty.
Charlie Parker's really public humiliation with Joe Jones
Mm,
and Lyndon Johnson's fight that just shattered his self-image. Very different situations, but each one represents that kind of bottom dropping out moment.
and a really insightful way to think about this is that concept from Greek mythology,
Katabasis.
katabasis,
Yeah.
going down, basically a descent. But the important thing isn't just the suffering, it's what often comes out of it. Heightened knowledge and understanding.
Ah, okay, so like hitting rock bottom. But in those old stories, the heroes went down to the underworld to gain wisdom.
Exactly. It highlights how sometimes facing the lowest points
Hmm.
can actually lead to real self-discovery.
It's like being forced to face uncomfortable truths head on, isn't it? Shedding the material calls it bullshit distractions and lies.
Precisely. Sometimes you need that descent to see clearly.
Mm.
It's about dismantling that unhealthy, ego-driven state we can get stuck in.
Mm.
But there's also this challenging idea, the saying, Duris dura franguntur. Hard things are broken by hard things.
Which really speaks to how stubborn our ego can be, right? How hard it is to self-correct.
It does. And Reverend Sutton's observation, we cannot be humble except by enduring humiliations. That really underscores it.
It's almost like those big perspective shifts often require moments where your whole understanding just gets shattered.
And the material outlines some common traits of these Fight Club moments to recognize, often from an outside force,
Okay.
often reveal truths we were maybe avoiding anyway,
Uh-huh.
and crucially, they present an opportunity, a chance for progress.
But, as the text points out, not everyone grabs that opportunity, and the big obstacle...
Ego, always ego. It
Yeah.
often plays a role in the downfall and then stops you learning from it.
Right.
The 2008 financial crisis is a huge example, a massive collective wake-up call.
Yeah, I remember.
But while some learned and adapted, others just slip back into old habits, potentially setting themselves up for an even bigger fall later.
Which leads right into why accepting truth and avoiding denial is so critical. That Hemingway quote is rough. The world breaks every one, and afterward many are strong at the broken places. But those that will not break it kills.
It's stark, isn't it? The world shows you the truth, but accepting it, that's a personal choice.
Mm.
And it's interesting how 12-step programs get mentioned, focusing on suppressing ego to find a more authentic self.
And the danger of denial really comes through with this idea of threatened egotism.
Yeah, like the examples given, the gang member defending honor, The rejected narcissist lashing out, the imposter trying to keep the facade going.
Right, situations where the ego feels attacked and leads to really destructive behavior. It reacts defensively, aggressively sometimes, just to protect that image, even if it means denying reality.
Now, what's fascinating is how this refusal to face truth can escalate things. Instead of owning a mistake, ego kicks in with defensiveness aggression.
The Lance Armstrong example is pretty potent there. The initial cheating was bad, obviously, but the years of denial, attacking others.
It just amplified everything, made it so much worse.
And that quote, John 3:20, everyone who does wicked things hates the light. It really captures that tendency, doesn't it?
It does. So the point seems to be, you have to face the symptoms to cure the disease. Even if criticism feels harsh, there might be something valuable in it.
It loops back to that Fight Club idea. Sometimes a dramatic break is what it takes for real change.
Vince Lombardi's quote, "A team like men must be brought to its knees before it can rise again," hits that same note. Hitting bottom can be a necessary step.
And President Obama's analogy, tumbling down Niagara Falls but surviving, that feeling of liberation, the learning that comes from weathering something huge.
Yeah, the key takeaway there is appreciating progress often requires acknowledging how deep the struggle was. You need the contrast.
Which brings us to a really crucial point, drawing the line protecting your character. Marcus Aurelius. It can ruin your life only if it ruins your character. That's important. It's so important. And the John DeLorean story is such a cautionary tale. Faced with his company failing, instead of reckoning with it, his ego drove him to just completely self-destructive actions.
And that question the material poses is key. Is this the person I want to be? Mistakes happen, ventures fail, sure. But the response is what defines you.
Mm-hmm. And the point about tying identity too closely to work, fueling the fear of failure, that's insightful.
Yeah, because then work failure feels like personal failure. It makes it harder to take responsibility.
Yeah.
Like that sunk cost fallacy idea.
Exactly. You keep pouring energy into something failing just because you already put so much in.
And that internal monologue when things go wrong, why me? How do I save this? How do I prove I'm great? Those are dangerous signs of ego leading you down a bad path.
The contrast between Steve Jobs' initial firing from Apple, maybe more ego-driven issues then,
Right.
and his later return, much more humble, transformative, it's really telling. He learned.
Whereas Dolph Charney at American Apparel, that's a stark example of unchecked ego leading to ruin for himself and the company. It really is. And the historical bit about Alcibiades betraying everyone because of ego, helping bring down Athens, it shows these patterns aren't new.
Alexander Hamilton's advice seems so relevant. Act with fortitude and honor. If you cannot reasonably hope for a favorable extrication, do not plunge deeper. Have the courage to make a full stop.
Right. It's about recognizing when to change course to avoid more damage.
And full stop doesn't necessarily mean quitting everything, right?
Just having the wisdom to pivot, reassess, maintain your dignity, your character, even when things aren't going well.
Like that losing sports team analogy, focus shifts from winning to just playing with integrity, upholding standards.
Exactly. And the material rightly points out, most trouble is temporary, unless ego steps in and drags it out.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, recovery is gradual, one step in front of the other. The cure shouldn't be worse than the disease.
So finally, let's talk perspective, resilience. The key thing is it's usually just ego-blowing embarrassment or failure out of proportion.
Absolutely. History is packed with people who bounce back from huge humiliations to have amazing careers. Politicians, actors, entrepreneurs.
So the choice in failure often comes down to a lose-lose driven by ego or a lose and then win scenario where you learn and adapt.
Right. Because loss, in some form, is just inevitable.
And it's ego resisting that loss that leads to desperate, risky actions, compounding the problem. Need to remember success and failure are temporary phases, not judgments of your worth.
So when things go sideways, don't desperately cling to what's failing. Go back to fundamentals, sound practices. That modified Seneca quote is sharp. He who will do anything to avoid failure will almost certainly do something worthy of a failure.
Oof, yeah. So the ultimate message seems clear. The only real failure is abandoning your principles. And a reputation that can't handle setbacks probably wasn't that strong anyway.
So wrapping this deep dive up,
Yeah.
the central takeaway is pretty clear. Failure is part of being human. It happens.
Yeah.
But it's those ego-driven reactions in those moments that determine if setbacks lead to more downfall or if they become catalysts for real growth or return to core values.
We really encourage everyone listening to, take some time, reflect on your own Fight Club moments. How did you handle those?
And And maybe a final thought to chew on as you go. Think about a time when ego might have stopped you from really acknowledging a failure. What could have been different if you'd embraced that going down, focused on character? What kind of bloody claw prints, as the source puts it, are you making right now in your own climb upwards?